Okay. Amity Blight, do you want to go out with me?
Man, shut your b-
Hello all, in this channel we've covered Loyalty Among Worlds, a fanfiction based on Amphibia, and The Owl and the Frog, a fanfiction combining both Amphibia and the Owl House, and now it's time to complete the other side of the equation. And what better fanfiction to cover than one that is almost given as much flack as Loyalty Among Worlds, based solely on a few images, not even screenshot edits, just artwork and posters. A fanfiction that places a young superpowered orphan witch and sends them to the Boiling Isles alongside Luce. Today, we will be reviewing The Seventh Son by Cowboy Alchemist, so let's get to it. Before we get started, here are some things to keep in mind. Firstly, I'll only be covering the first season in this video, as not only that's what I do usually, but also because season 2 isn't even finished as of writing, with only 2 chapters having been completed. Secondly, there isn't that much artwork having been illustrated to depict the events of a scene, so I'll just use the good old reliable character renders and use any artwork I can find alongside said renders. Thirdly, this fanfiction was written, or at least planned, prior to Amity Blight being revealed as a lesbian by Dana Terrace, the show's creator, in a Reddit Ask Me Anything thread, hence why this exists. As to why Cowboy Alchemist didn't retcon it, or at least change it, is a bit unknown, but whatever. Fourth, and this goes without saying, I recommend that you have watched The Owl House previously prior to watching this video, and I'll also be leaving a link to the fanfiction.net page of this fanfiction so you can check it out for yourselves. Finally, donate to my Ko-Fi or Patreon, link down below, to gain early access to videos, exclusive Discord perks, and more. Without further ado, let us begin. The story begins with our main character, 13-year-old Booker Bridges, being scolded by the nun at his orphanage for having started a fight with another person over his Good Witch Azura book. Despite Booker insisting that he did not start the fight, the nun told him that he should have just kept the book in his room. After some more arguing with the nun asking herself why Father Dean bothers with him, Booker sulks in his bed and looks at the photo tucked away in his Azura book. That photo being of himself and his family taken 7 years prior, and that on his 7th birthday, just 1 day later, a house fire would take the lives of all but one in the family, that person being Booker himself, and that the next day would not only be his 14th birthday, but the 7th anniversary of that fire. Cut to the next day, and we have Booker arriving at school and being greeted by Luce Nocida, who is stated to be his, quote, secret crush. I mean, what happened to show don't tell? Who hands him a cupcake with a candle in it to celebrate his birthday. Luce notices Booker looking slightly beat up and asks if he's okay, to which Booker brushes it off. But Luce sees that Booker isn't really okay, to which Booker explains that the person whom he fought poked fun at his late parents and claimed that they were, quote, burning in hell, which really set Booker off, and he began beating them up. Luce comforted him and told him just to laugh it up like she does. The topic then turns to the upcoming presentation, with the two confident that they'll ace it, only for us to cut to the next scene with the two in the principal's office. The principal scolds the two for using live snakes in their presentation, with Camila and Father Dean, the head of the orphanage, present. The principal also states that whilst this school is more than willing to accept orphans, that this incident was just the last straw for this, quote, little runt. Calling him that just made Booker extra pissed and even lashed out at the principal. Christ, everyone's so fucking pissed, not even the 3rd scene yet. Father Dean tries to reassure the principal, but the principal groaned and begged him to do something before he broke down in tears. Fast forward later, and we have Camila about to send Luce to summer camp, though here we also have Dean about to send Luce to the same summer camp. From here it follows pretty much the same as the first episode of The Owl House, with Luce and Booker following Albert, who took the Good Witch Azura book, running into the portal, entering the demon realm, and encountering Ida Clawthorn. Luce snatches the book, Ida prepares to confront them, but the two leg it, with Booker straight up calling Ida a bitch. Shenanigans ensue, not too dissimilar from what happens in canon, and now we have Booker and Luce re-encountering Ida. The two introduce themselves, to which Ida takes notice of Booker's second name. Ida calls Booker Little, which really sets him off, and then the authorities arrive. Booker goes up to one of them and not only sucker punches them in the eye, but literally throws himself over their shoulder and hits them in the back, or I don't know, this is written weirdly. Oh wait, no, he literally threw a guard over his shoulder, like, damn! Like, throwing a teenager or adult human over his shoulder, sure, that's not exactly unheard of for 14-year-olds, I've seen it happen, but yeah, that is one strong 14-year-old, even makes Luce blush. Anyway, like in canon, Ida fights off against him, and she, alongside Booker and Luce, dips. A similar conversation happens between Luce and Ida whilst on Albert, much like canon, except of course with Booker. Speaking of, Ida pieces together that Booker is the 7th son, killing any and all potential suspense or investigation that Ida or even the reader would have, We even get Booker's dad being name dropped too. Like, come on, this just screams wasted potential. Like, we were robbed, I'm telling you. What's next? Ida might as well just go and say, oh, I have this curse that'll make me turn into a monster if I don't drink this elixir every once in a while. Upon arrival to the Owl House, the exact same shit as canon happens, just with Booker saying stuff, so you're not exactly missing much. Luce and Booker are introduced to King, both are briefed by Ida as to what they should do for her in exchange for being able to return home. Fast forward to later, now the group are at the Conformatorium. Luce and Booker break out all the prisoners, Warden Wrath comes to punish them, but he's distracted by nearly killing Tiny Nose, like, Jesus Christ. And they arrive at the contraband room. However, as the group approached the light, a glowing glyph began to form on Booker's hand. Ooh. And when Booker pulled away, the glyph disappeared. He put his hand in the light again and it reappeared, much to Ida's amazement. Booker pulls out a sword and, much like in canon, the crown in question turns out to be a Burger Queen crown, or Burger King since XPs or parodies of real products aren't needed in fanfiction. Booker lashes out at Ida for nearly getting them killed and threatens her. Why didn't Luce step in to try and defend her or at least defuse the situation? I don't know. Ida tells the two that she only really has King and that us weirdos have to stick together, you get that line. Warden Wrath arrives, decapitates Ida, which freaks out the duo, but she's fine and asks Ida out, though Warden does reveal the name of Booker's sword, Dragon's Bite. Same shit as canon happens before Booker then decides to help out with his sword. Luce tries using fireworks, but they fail as Warden Wrath slices them in half. Booker then jumps in out of nowhere, stabs Wrath in the stomach, the runes on Dragon Bites begin glowing as did his eyes before he straight up effortlessly fights and then decapitates him. Like, come on! I get he's the 7th son and all, but this just surely could have been executed way better because he just seems overpowered as fuck. Anyway, everyone cheers the group now that the Warden is dead, the group return home. Ida explains that Booker is the 7th son of Malcolm Bridges, Booker's dad, and that he needs to learn to control his magic. Right before going like, alright, you guys are gonna go home like I promised. But then the two decide, nah, we're gonna stay, especially since Booker, since he really had no future nor purpose on Earth. The chapter then ends with the two making themselves at home in Ida's storage closet, and Booker feeling good about this new world. This chapter was pretty meh. It presents interesting ideas, and whilst it's not particularly bad, it still suffers from the fact that all of these reveals happen pretty much all at once, leaving little in the way of suspense. To this chapter's credit, I think these ideas were interesting, and if they were to have, you know, proper build-up, then they would have made for interesting arcs, and the chemistry between Booker and Luce is fine. I'm not offended by it, but it could use some work. Overall, a pretty mediocre start, 3 out of 10. This chapter is basically witches before wizards, so I'll keep this brief. The chapter starts off more or less the same as canon. Luce wakes up to find out it's not a dream and attempts to wake Booker up, even teasing him as someone from his orphanage, though that backfired when Booker threatened her before he woke up. Booker went into the bathroom to get ready before being jump scared by Hootie and punching him in the face, though he did apologise, so it's all good. In the kitchen, he tried to get something to eat though got jump scared by tentacles. Luckily, he used Dragon's Bite to dispatch that, so it's all Gucci, and after that, found some eggs. Same shit as canon happens and Luce, Booker and King are made to deliver potions around Bonesborough and run into Adagast. Whilst Luce is credulous and falls for his chosen one spiel, Booker is suspicious because, well, of course he is. Cut to back home and Luce is super optimistic whilst Booker tells her, girl, that man is lying to you. You just stepped right into this world and you barely even know this dude. Now, what will Luce do? Will Luce A, heed Booker's warning and realise that there's a high likelihood of Adagast being full of shit, you know, too good to be true and all? Or B, completely ignore his warning and then the exact same shit as canon happens? Surprise, surprise, he picked option B, and it plays almost exactly the same as canon. It's just that Booker uses his sword to kill Adagast, and he falls into a ditch instead of Ida eating him. God fucking damn it, there's not even a unique ending, it's just the same but Luce blushing at Booker. God damn, this chapter was boring. Literally nothing has changed from canon, the dialogue that is original is fine, I don't hate it, but that doesn't really save the chapter from getting a 3 out of 10. This is just I was a teenage abomination, and it begins more or less the same as it is in canon. Ida takes Luce, Booker and King to scavenge junk from a dead beach slug. Luce decides to wander off despite Booker's warnings. The two hear a voice and discover Willow trying to do magic before Amity starts mocking her, you know, like canon. Booker, taking shit from nobody, stands up for Willow and promptly tells Amity off. Actually no, he just doesn't and just sits there with Luce watching because reasons. Willow then gets pissed and summons a bunch of vines like in canon, 2 of which target Luce and Booker. Booker manages to get rid of one aiming at Luce with Dragon's Bite, but he himself gets caught. The screams of both Booker and Luce grab Willow's attention. Booker gets into a fighting stance, but Willow manages to calm down and apologise, with Luce coming over to defuse the situation. Same shit as canon follows though. Note that Willow refers to Luce and Booker as having round ears despite, and Luce deciding on sneaking into Hexside via pretending to be Abomination despite Booker's protests. Chapter then proceeds pretty much the same as canon, you're not really missing much. Cut to them at school with Gus having given Booker a spare cowl. The teacher then catches Booker and asks what he's doing here. Booker claims that he's part of the quote up and coming weapons track as an excuse. To his surprise, it actually worked, with the teacher relieved that they're opening a magical arms track, and sit next to Amity. When Amity asks why she never heard of that track, Booker replies that it's because it's a new track, with quote, "New one would know about it." New one? Seriously? Don't you mean no one? Like, have you guys ever heard of proofreading? Seriously, get a beta reader to look at the typos and stuff, you'll avoid this shit. Same shit as canon happens, just with Booker being, Booker. After the whole cafeteria thing, Booker runs into the toilet and encounters a teacher who interrogates him about the supposed new track. However, as it turns out, that teacher was none other than Principal Bump. And as it turns out, it was Amity who told Bump about Booker, typo included. Bump notes how Booker looks sort of familiar and mentions he's related to Malcolm Bridges. Man, if only this shit was revealed later, then I'd actually give a shit. Same old as canon, it's just that Bump has Booker being carried via levitation and that Dragon Bite was being carried under his armpit. Oh, and also Luce is referred to as Booker's crush. Again. Same old shenanigans happens in canon, it's just that Booker uses Dragon's Bite against the Abominations and crushes Amity's badge. Chapter ends exactly the same as canon, no surprises here. This chapter was presenting some interesting ideas, and Booker coming up with an excuse was funny, and I did find the fight scene at the end was pretty nice. It still doesn't make the chapter any less that boring, and it doesn't save it from a 3 out of 10. It's the Intruder. Let's get this over with. The start of the chapter goes exactly the same as canon. Seriously, not much differences here. Boiling rain, all that. It's just that Luce is referred to as Booker's crush twice. Like, man, we get it! Anyway, Ida reveals that Booker's father, Malcolm, performed magic via clapping his hands together, with Ida recalling him having said that magic is a, quote, trinity of mind, body, and spirit. Same story as canon, there's almost nothing for me to say if you watch the episode. You've already seen this. There is, however, a flashback to when Booker first met Luce 7 years ago. Luce was just playing with her Azura doll, only for a group of bullies to come in and torment her before tearing her Azura figure in half, leaving Luce in tears. Booker then investigates and asks what's wrong. Luce explains what the group did before Booker comes over to confront said group. When the leader made fun of Booker's parents, Booker then proceeded to beat the shit out of them, like Jesus Christ, but honestly, good one for standing up for a stranger. Same shit as canon happens, except instead of King Groove and Luce, it's Booker who investigates what's going on because, of course he does. They find out that the creature is Ida, her elixir is revealed to be keeping the curse at bay, and Luce learns how to perform magic via drawing the light glyph, after pausing the video on her phone. Meanwhile, Booker performs magic via picturing the light glyph in his hands, remembering about magic being a, quote, trinity of mind, body, and spirit, and boom! He has a light glyph. From then on, it proceeds the same as canon. They even use a pen to distract and lure Ida, the light glyph to knock her out, and using the elixir to turn her back. At the end of the chapter, it is revealed that Malcolm tried everything to cure Ida, and unfortunately, nothing worked, and it only served to push Malcolm and Ida apart. It's also revealed that Booker is a descendant of Ida Clawthorn. Wow, only if that was revealed much later. This chapter was pretty lame, given that it's literally just copying canon but just replacing Luce and King with Booker. I did like the flashback to how Booker and Luce met. I thought that was pretty sweet, and the ending about Ida being related to Booker would have been interesting had it been revealed much later. Overall, this chapter gets a 4 out of 10. It's convention, and it proceeds pretty much the same as canon, though we do get told that Malcolm never joined a coven, so let's skip to the part where Amity, after having re-encountered Luce and Booker, is challenged by Luce to a witch's duel so that Luce can prove that she's an actual witch. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say Luce? I meant Booker challenges Amity to a witch's duel because, of course he does. Once Ida introduces Liv to Booker and Luce, we are told that Liv not only had a crush on Malcolm, but she was also jealous of Ida. Oh great, we had a love triangle, that's just brilliant, isn't it?
Cut to the witch's duel itself, and everyone belittles Booker, which only serves to infuriate him, especially a comment that refers to him as a bean sprout, given that Booker's insecure about his height. After asking Ida if he has a chance to win against Amity, to which she says she has no real answer, Luce pulls Booker into a hug before kissing him on the before wishing Booker good luck. The duel begins and Amity summons a massive abomination that almost crushed Booker, but he managed to get out of the way and slice its hand with Dragon's Bite, surprising both Amity and Booker given how thick the abomination slime is in this instance. Booker then remembered that Ida said Dragon's Bite is made of anti-magic metal, meaning that it can repel magic. Oh, that's not overpowered at all. Oh, no. During the fight, Booker concentrates and the runes light up on the sword, summoning an orb of light and distracting the abomination. Some more fighting later and a piece of abomination goo knocks the sword off Booker's hand, but no biggie, he can just pull it back. Whilst arguing, King accidentally tripped over a scarf and fell into the arena, landing between the two. Amity taunts Booker by lifting King via his collar despite his and Booker's demands to put him down. Then Amity summons a large abomination that crushes Booker. Oh dear! Oh no! Booker has seemingly been defeated! But what's this? A bright light begins to form under the abomination, and to the shock of everyone, Booker goes fucking Super Saiyan. What? Look, this is only the 5th chapter, man! In terms of appearance, Super Booker, if I'm gonna call him that, his glowing eyes and glowing lines spread across his body. Amity grabs him by the hoodie and demands to know what is going on, only for Booker to summon an energy blast that knocks her, Luce, Ida, Lilith and King back. He clapped his hands and summoned several light orbs that form a magical whirlwind that begins to destroy the stadium. Okay, where have I seen this before? Ida then explains that Booker lost control of his powers, noting that this was a trait shared by Malcolm, but this is apparently on another scale. Amity attempts to summon another abomination, only for Booker to summon a larger version of Dragon's Bite and effortlessly slice through it. Lilith attempts to get the guards to try and stop Booker, but their attacks had no effect on his light shield. Booker then forms a massive tentacle out of the light shield and swats them away. Thankfully, Booker's rampage is ended after Luce talks him out of it and thus calms him down. Where have I seen that before? It turns out that Booker has no recollection of what happened. Amity gets pissed at him, accuses him of having known what was happening, and storms. A little while later, Booker reflects on Luce kissing him on the cheek, stating it felt nice, and the chapter ends pretty much the same as canon. It's just that we have Belos showing an interest in Booker, or the 7th son, as we are reminded. This chapter is not good. Booker hoarding Luce's spotlight and going Super Saiyan is plain absurd. Now, you may think, well, in Avatar The Last Airbender, Aang went into the Avatar state in the 1st episode, and that Booker being calmed down by Luce is similar to Katara calming down Aang in the 3rd episode, so what's the issue? Well, here's the thing. And first off, in the latter's case, I found that interesting and there's nothing wrong with borrowing beats from other stories, as if I generally thought so, then I'd be the biggest hypocrite on earth. Secondly, well, Aang was not holding the spotlight from a normally main protagonist. The fight between Luce and Amity in canon was great because it showcases a stark contrast, Luce being really scared and anxious, running away and just hoping that Amity's abominations land on Ida's traps, whilst Amity is confident and boastful. In this fic, however, it's incredibly boring because not only Booker and Amity are evenly matched, with Booker even more so as a result of going Super Saiyan, and that just completely breaks the flow of the fight and it's just not fun to read. Overall, 3 out of 10. Lame chapter. It's the episode of the same name, and it's practically exactly the same as canon, just with Booker added on. Oh, for fuck's sake! You know the story. Moonlight Conjuring, Willow and Gus are excluded from the one held by Amity and her friend group. They perform a conjuring at the Owl House despite Ida's wishes and Booker's advice because, yeah, of course he knows best, and the house becoming more alive than it originally was. The part that does change, however, is towards the end. The group is tied up and dumped inside the house by the demon hunters. Booker calls in Dragon's Bite and asks that Willow use her magic to unsheath it. Willow apologizes and explains her backstory with Amity. Also note that they're not being dangled off the edge of a cliff with a branch. Using Dragon's Bite, Willow cuts the rope and the group finds himself not at the edge of the cliff but far from it. What's more is that the demon hunters have stopped moving and are looking at a cloaked figure wearing a Plague Doctor mask and a bat talisman. He makes quick work of the demon hunters via a variety of magic before he disappears. Chapter ends the same way as canon, just with a cloaked figure watching the Owl House from afar and saying some stuff to himself. There isn't really much for me to say other than this chapter once again just rips off canon for a majority of its duration. The reference to Booker's height and him just being called a hybrid just feels short, and once again, please,
Just call them Booker and Luce. Like, stop making it for both. Stop using stuff like Dominican Girl, Luce's Crush, Hybrid. Just call them Booker and Luce, please. Though I do find the end pretty cool. I really hope that gets followed up. Overall, this chapter gets a 4 out of 10. It's lost in a language, so let's just get cracking. The chapter begins the same as canon. The Bat Queen sends her children to Ida, Luce, King and Booker to take care of them in exchange for one hell of a fortune. Except of course, Luce doesn't go to the library, it's Booker because reasons. Booker heads to the library, has a small scroll of the librarian, he helps the child find his friends, and as it turns out, their friends are being read to by Amity. Note that the child isn't Warden Rath's son, as Warden Rath is, well... Booker finds out that it's Amity and so tries playing nice, but Amity just goes,
Go and fuck yourself.
which serves to sadden Booker. Enter Edric and Amira. The two tell him not to let Amity get to his head before introducing themselves. Booker once again tries to get on Amity's good side before she promptly tells him to kick rocks. Same shenanigans as canon ensues, nothing really much to note here, until we have Booker and the Blight twins in Amity's secret room and reading her diary entries. Amity comes in, scolds Booker, and gives him pretty much the same speech he gave to losing Canon and just calls Booker a bully. The twins just shrug this off and even laugh. This just serves to anger Booker, so much so that his eyes glow and even sucker punches Amira and Edric in the face and nose respectively. Booker gives them a reason you suck speech about how they're nothing like Booker's late siblings. All without saying as little as they may not have been perfect, like... What? Anyway, same shit as canon, Booker and Amity team up to defeat Otabin. Amity's given the Azura book she's been missing and apologizes to Booker. A little while later, Booker goes home and the chapter ends with him looking at a photo of his late brother, Luke, and feeling sad about it. This chapter was not great. Whilst I think Booker telling off Edric and Amira was deserved and perhaps the only thing this chapter really has going for it above the canon episode, I do think it could have been executed a little bit better, but I find it nice. The rest of the chapter is pretty boring, just the same shit as canon with Booker instead of Luce and not really much changing. Overall, a boring chapter that gets a 4 out of 10. This chapter is based off the episode Something Ventured, Something Framed. Same flow as canon, Gus just wants to impress the Human Appreciation Society at Hexside, and to keep his spot and despite Bartholomew, he lies to Booker and Luce about being unbanned from Hexside, whilst Ida prepares to unroll them. The chapter is pretty much the same as canon, you're not missing much, if anything. In order to enroll, Ida has to clean up her mess and vandalism from when she was in Hexside. During one instance, she walks in on Scar and Bo, they do their magic thing and they... What the fuck? Yeah, I'm sorry. Why the fuck was this included? Like, I get the story is supposed to be a sort of a mature take on the Owl House, but like, mate, they are both 14 years old. Come on, man. Anyway, cut to Booker, Luce, and Gus in detention, and they prepare to break their way out. Booker uses shadow clones pretty much, even lampshading it being a Naruto reference. Amity is also present in this episode because... reasons. Anyway, the chapter ends the same as canon, except that Ida knew the Bat Witch. This chapter, as you can tell by my summary, was not enjoyable to read. It's pretty much exactly the same as episodes, with pretty much zero changes, and thus, it's really freaking boring. The dialogue and chemistry between the characters was pretty cool, and probably the only highlight of this chapter, as is the characterization. And that scene of Bo and Scar is just one big fat fucking ick. Like, yeah, sure, include two 14-year-olds making out, that's surely gonna sit well with a lot of people. This just downgrades an otherwise 3 out of 10 chapter to a 2 out of 10. Just no. After 8 chapters, we finally get an original chapter. This one takes place during Escape of the Palisman, but don't worry, it's original. Though the chapter starts off basically like canon, so let's cut to when the group are back at the Owl House. After Luce sets off to watch the game with Gus and Willow, or some attempts to anyway, Booker asks Ida if she knew anything about a quote, a wizard that wears a crow mask, leading Ida to reveal that she's known as the Crow Wizard, quote unquote. She goes on to elaborate that not much is really known about him other than he practices wild magic, targets Coven Scout patrols, and potentially starting a rebel group, the latter being rumours though. Also Booker's nickname being... Wade? I'm sorry, how can you not fucking catch this during any proofread? Like, come on. Some preparation in dealing with Ida's curse later, and now Booker and King arrive at where the Crow Wizard was last spotted, being the cliff in chapter 6. Booker feels uneasy, feeling like both he and King are being watched, and to make matters worse, a patrol of Empress Coven Scouts showed up and asked what Booker and King were doing there. Booker claims that he and King were just going for a stroll, and that excuse actually works, only for the Empress Scout to go,
Say, hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
and figure out he's the seventh son that the Emperor wants so badly. With that, Booker uses a light spell to blind him temporarily before he and King make a run for it. Booker creates a bunch of shadow clones of himself and King that go off in separate directions. Only one Coven scout, being my man Steve, goes after the real Booker and King. Steve shoots a fireball that manages to knock King off Booker, and now Steve is celebrating that he's going to get promoted whilst calling all the other Coven scouts. Just before any fighting commenced, however, someone came in and kicked Steve in the head and knocked him into a tree. First thinking that it's a crow wizard, Booker then notices the person's hood has bunny ears. Oh my god, Velvet Scarlatina, is that you? A fight ensues involving glyphs. One scout attempts to sneak up on them, but Booker takes care of that. The person asks if this really is Booker Bridges, to which Booker is surprised. It turns out pretty much everyone at Hexside knows who he is, especially after going Super Saiyan at the convention. Booker, surprised, then asks if he knows anything about the Crow Wizard. The mage then threatens Booker with his staff, asking how he knows about the Crow Wizard. Booker explains that he's likely someone important to him, only to be cut off by someone else, that person being none other than the Crow Wizard himself. King called him father, which is that supposed to be a reference to something? Anyway, Booker pulls out a photo from his pocket, that of his late family, and presents it to the Crow Wizard. Afterwards, the Crow Wizard took off his massive... What? His massive what? Come on, what do you take off? Your shirt, your boots, your face, your skull? Come on. Anyway, he reveals that he's none other than York Bridges, Booker's uncle, albeit as York Gearmind, and the bunny-eared person was named Roswell Bridges. Holy shit, he's a faunus. Asking Booker to see if his brother Malcolm was here, Booker tells him the bad news, and York does not take it that well, asking as to how. Booker explains the house fire before Roswell tells him that they have to get going as more scouts are probably going to turn up. After Steve calls Lilith that Booker is here alongside the Crow Wizard, we cut to the group arriving at a supposed hideout, alongside an obligatory joke about Booker's height. Yeah, that's definitely not getting old. The hideout actually was hidden as it required a spell circle to enter and resembles an old looking temple. Claus, one of the individuals guarding the place, asks for a password, and that password is just password. The group then enter the main chamber, which is like a living room. Two people present were Hexside students, one of whom being from the Oracle Coven. Then another person entered, and to Booker's shock, it was none other than Skara, who was nonchalant about the fact that she was in Amity's friend group. Oh, and King is salty about Skara's brother being the quote, usurper. After that, we are then introduced to Sarah, who, after scolding York for bringing Roswell on the mission, is shocked to see Booker here, as well as, well, you know by now. Everyone is amazed, given that Malcolm and the others fled to Earth. This would have been so much more impactful if it weren't just, Lord dumped all of it right away from the word go, but I digress. Skara introduces Booker as the kid who nearly destroyed the convention. At dusk, the group have a discussion after Booker explains everything. Some more chatter, it's revealed that the Bridges family are apparently the most noble and powerful family in the Boiling Isles, and people love them for their more progressive and liberal ideas, compared to Balos's more conservative ideas. We cut to a flashback 14 years ago. After getting word from the head of the Oracle Coven that Booker was about to be born, Belos sends out a team of assassins to take out the Bridges family. The Bridges managed to stand their ground, but when Belos arrived, it was like a primary school basketball game, but then LeBron James joins the other team, and that's when they knew they were giga fucked, especially when the manor was sent ablaze. Malcolm's wife and children fled to Earth before York destroyed the portal and lost consciousness as a result of the fight, catching a glimpse of Belos's true form. Whilst York was managed to be escorted away to safety by Sarah, everybody else who was still in the demon realm wasn't so lucky, and so Belos had them summarily executed, all of this having occurred on July 7th. The flashback ends and it's revealed that the surviving relatives of Booker's family have organised a resistant movement against the Emperor's Coven. Yeah, baby, move over, Kaz, because these guys are in charge. They toast their fallen family members, but unfortunately Lilith and her Coven patrol show up, and now they have to escape, given that Lilith and the Coven scouts were now breaking in. York tells everyone to flee whilst he stands his ground, and despite his protests, also tells Booker to flee. Lilith's group breaks in and finds an empty room. Then York comes in and promptly tells them to piss off. Lilith refuses and places York under arrest. York retorts by accusing Lilith of literally glazing Belos, and then a fight ensures. The shockwave of York's weapon causes Booker to sense it, and yeah, he can sense shockwaves now. Okay, what's with these guys are making their OCs fucking Thanos? Like, he can sense shockwaves and nobody else can? Anyhow, Booker says that he needs to help York because he's the seventh son after all, and thus can stop Lilith. Alice argues against it, stating that not only he just has a fraction of his full magic, but he can't control it either. Booker attempts to run off anyway, but Alice puts him in a levitation spell. She is convinced, however, when we then cut to the fight between York and Lilith, with Lilith using fire magic and York using electricity magic, and then, oh my god, what is this dialogue? Like, bro, come on. York also revealed that he tutored Lilith, much to Lilith's shock, and asks how Ida would think of Lilith joining the Emperor's Coven. Just as it seems Lilith was about to deliver the finishing blow to York, Booker and King come in clutch, with Booker using Dragon's Bite. During the fight, Lilith tells them that they'd understand if they knew what she were doing. Oh boy, does this mean they'd at least let Lilith explain her reasons for trying to capture Ida and Booker, namely to help Ida be cured, and that they could potentially find another way, and that also ensures Booker's safety, or at the very least show that Lilith doesn't have ill intentions?
No.
Anyway, the fight results in the entire temple collapsing, forcing everybody to flee. Lilith tries pursuing them, but then the tunnel collapses, cutting her off. The group arrive back at the Owl House, albeit at night. Booker asks if York is going to be alright, to which York replies that he planned for this moment and then his father will be proud of him. During a hug, York regrets not telling Booker about ER Saberslayer's prophecy, but he's not strong enough and that he's not ready. After York departs, Luce is happy to see Booker and King, but Ida scolds him for having ran off and been gone for so long. Booker then explains what has happened and Ida feels a lot more sympathetic. Luce comforts Booker and... what? Please, Cowboy Alchemist, I beg of you, proofread your writing! Anyway, Luce holds Booker's hand and it's described as feeling and the chapter ends much like in canon, with Ida noticing the curse is getting worse. This chapter was... interesting. It had all the ingredients for a great chapter and it was executed... decently. It was a good conclusion to the Crow Wizard mini arc, if you call it that, and I think the whole Hideout area is cool. The people in the Hideout are... well, I don't really have much to say about their personalities because we barely could gauge them, but this is their debut story, so this is just a given. The dialogue here is hit or miss. York and Booker's chemistry thus far is really good, and their dialogue is nice to read. The fight between York and Lilith, on the other hand, it's really clunky. It's not Loyalty Among Worlds 1.0 bad, but it's still just really awkward to read. Lilith telling them that she's doing this for her sister is a missed opportunity. She could have explained why she wants to bring them to Balos, them explaining that Balos is not only lying, but he may not even want to cure Ida in the first place. That could have changed the dynamics of the story drastically, and we could have had the rest of the fic being drastically different and more interesting. But that's neither here nor there. The pacing is okay, some parts could have been slower, a little faster, and the typos are just getting really annoying. Had a lot of stuff not been revealed early on in the story, I would have probably found this chapter a lot more interesting. Overall, this decent chapter gets a 6 out of 10. It's Adventure in the Elements. Also just want to point out that Once Upon a Swap and Sense and Sensitivity were skipped, and honestly, good call, because these episodes were... Chapter begins pretty much the same as canon, and it just goes pretty much exactly the same. Luce and Booker ready to enter Hexside, they just need to actually showcase they can do magic so they get put in the infant track. Ida says they'll cheat to magic, so let's just skip to the part where they're on the knee of the Isles. Ida reminisces of when she and Malcolm took down a group of bandits, and thus we cut to a flashback of when Ida and Malcolm were kids. They lured in a group of bandits via pretending to be a married couple. The bandits thought they struck gold given they recognised Malcolm as the Bridges, though Ida and Malcolm wore male and female clothes respectively due to a rock paper scissors game. Then come the revealing, yeah, it's implied they get bodied off screen. The group arrive at their destination with Booker calling it gorgeous, while Luce says, not as gorgeous as you are, for fuck's sake. Okay, can we just talk about the Booker x Luce ship real quick? Okay, I'm not against shipping the Booker with Luce, as 1, OCX canon is base as hell, and 2, Luce is bisexual. But holy crap was this ship executed poorly. It's established Booker has a crush on Booker in chapter 1. Okay, cool. But in the next chapter, Luce starts crushing on him? I'm sorry, but this has to be some of the worst pacing I've seen from any relationship ever. Even Loyalty Among Worlds 1.0 had better pacing in this regard. For comparison with canon, Amity begins crushing on Luce around the first day, though it becomes obvious around enchanting Grom fights. Luce's crush, meanwhile, begins around escaping expulsion. Amity kisses Luce on the cheek at the end of Through the Looking Glass Ruins, and the next time Luce sees Amity, they finally confess and knocking on Hootie's door, before we finally have their first kiss on clouds on the horizon. Throughout the series, we can see their relationship grow and develop from enemies to becoming friends to becoming partners, and them sharing their first kiss feels like the culmination of their entire relationship arc, and it is the best way to end a character arc / subplot in fiction. It feels natural, it's smooth, and it keeps the audience or readers, depending on the medium, engaged and waiting for the moment of truth. On the contrary, having crushes be established early just makes it really boring in case of will they, won't they? The relationship doesn't grow and evolve, and instead basically nothing happens aside from the awkward flirt or two until much later. For as much as I trashed on loyalty among worlds during my review, it at least managed to get Daryl and Anne's relationship progression sort of right, with Daryl falling for Anne first, then Anne, though it does drag on shortly thereafter until, you know. Same shit as canon happens. Ida makes him do weird shit by tasting stove, then tasting moss, and now sniffing rocks. Roswell comes and is introduced by Booker before he advises Booker and Luce against learning dangerous spells and remarks how Ida's method is similar to Alice's method. He talks about magic being, quote, "Magic is a gift from the island. It surrounds us in every shape and form, and that is the reason they use spell circles, because it's the nature of the world. The island gives us magic, and that by casting spells, we return magic to the island." Okay, this dialogue sounds familiar. Anyway, cut to Luce having stolen Amity's training wand, and as a result, Booker gives Luce shit for it. Ida comes in to question Luce, with Booker telling Luce to tell Ida what happened. Canon shenanigans happen just with Booker using Dragon's Bite to try and fend off the Slither Beast, with Roswell coming in to help, though Booker does get injured. The Slither Beast abducts twins, Booker and Ida, before Luce, Amity and Roswell give chase, but fail. Roswell and Amity ask Luce to stay put despite Luce's protest. Amity puts Luce in a cage, she learns a new glyph, come on, you've seen the episode. Luce then runs off to save Ida and the twins alongside helping Booker, Amity and Roswell. The group fight the Slither Beast, Ida and the twins are rescued, Roswell introduces himself to Ida, Booker considers a secret club for him, Luce and Amity. Some stuff later and the chapter ends the same as canon, just with Booker being spooked by fire. This chapter was painfully mid! A majority of it was just taken from canon, the dialogue was clunky and overall just was not fun to read. Though I did like Roswell's inclusion, that was pretty neat and he's honestly one of my favourite characters from the stick thus far. I do hope we get to see more of him, but unfortunately, he does not save this chapter from getting a 4 out of 10. This chapter is just the first day, which is actually my favourite episode of season 1. Let's get this over with. Same radio as canon, just with Booker, so let's just get to the part where Luce and Booker are assigned to their covens. Luce is assigned to potions like in canon, whereas Booker is sent to the detention track due to the Emperor's coven sending out an inspector, and thus due to Booker's wanted status, the authorities would shut down the school. Bump reassures Booker that these are just provisional measures just for today. Cut to Booker being placed in a detention's coven, which sucks for him, but hey ho, he's got his cousins Jason and Felix, so it's all good. After being introduced to Viney, Gerbo, Boricus and Celine, the name given to this fella here, Booker asks what this place is before Viney jokes about being the last place he'll ever see. It backfires as Booker pulls out Dragon's Bite, so Viney goes, "Hey bro, it's just a prank bro." The group take him into the secret room with shortcuts, the back rooms, which leads Booker to make a joke about the actual back rooms. Felix explains they're all connected to each and every part of the school. I mean, you've already seen the episode, so you should know this by now. Amity rambles to herself about going to the same school as Luce and Booker. The group reveals why they're in detention, that being because they tried learning more than one track. Felix reveals that he has a crush on a mute girl before Booker asks if he can check how Luce is doing in the potions track. Jason points Booker to where the door is, and Booker checks to see Luce getting in trouble and being sent to detention before being dropped right in front of Booker. Bump then greets the inspector, and then we cut to the school auditorium, and then we see the inspector is actually Basilisk. The Basilisk then reveals her true form to Amity and demands to know where Booker is. Amity prepares to engage in a fight, but Bump takes the hit for her. Unfortunately, he could only tell Amity to flee and warn Booker before he goes unconscious. Meanwhile, Luce and Booker were pretty happy, just peeking into classrooms and learning any spell they desired. The happiness is cut short, however, when Felix runs in and warns them that something is attacking the school, and Booker concludes that whatever attacked Blandis must be attacking Hexside. Cut to Amity trying to warn Booker and Luce, but she is unfortunately unable to find them. She runs into Gus and Willow, the latter being surprised that she called Luce and Booker her friends. Amity asks that they try to help her and find the Basilisk, but it's cut short when the Basilisk arrives. Gus and Willow try to fight it off, but they get their magic drained. Amity was next, but lucky for her, Booker steps in and stabs the creature in the eye with Dragon's Bites, and okay, it's not written nicely. It should have just said something like this. Anyway, Amity explains to Booker that it's the reason she wants him as well. You can all guess why. They consult the crystal balls used for the Oracle track to find out what exactly they're dealing with. The crystal ball tells them that the basilisks are very dangerous and, quote, very extinct. Like, come on. The easiest way to check if it sounds right is to say it out loud. Like, does very extinct sound right to anyone? Anyone? Anyway, the group devised a plan to deal with the basilisk. Luce and Amity are on board, whilst the rest of the detention track disagrees, citing the school rules and how they might be kicked out. Booker then tears into the group, saying how they should break the rules in order to save their friends, especially since they're already troublemakers. They fight the inspector, who reveals she killed a real one prior to arrival. Finds she uses the group using combination of magic before Booker finishes off with Dragon's Bite. Bump then scolds them for mixing magic and plans to kick them out of school, but lucky for them, Book tears into Bump and questions his ethics and morals if rating and funding is all he cares about. Bump concedes and allows students to choose multiple tracks, and the chapter chapter ends the same as canon. This chapter was, well, I have mixed thoughts. Whilst I do find the fight scene kinda cool, I do wish Luce did a little more and she was the one who actually did most of the plannings. It just feels like Booker hoarding up the spotlight. I do like that Amity gets some action though. Dialogue still suffers similar issues of just being a tad clunky, grammatical errors here and there, and the writing is of dubious quality. Overall, this chapter does get a 5 out of 10. Alright, this chapter is based off the episode of the exact same name. So the last chapter was decent when it was based off the first day, so let's take a... It's exactly the same. I'm not being facetious, the chapter is literally the fucking same. It's just that Booker getting spooked by fire because you know fire is a trigger to him. So let's just cut down to the end. Booker reveals to Ida that he feels guilty for having started a house fire that ultimately killed his family and thus breaks down in tears. Ida comforts Booker and that ends the chapter. The ending was neat, I guess, but the chapter is literally just canon, so there's nothing for me to say other than 2 out of 10. What a shame. Only 4 chapters left of season 1, and this chapter is based on the enchanting Grom fight. Virtually nothing changes aside from the conversation about Booker's reoccurring nightmares, so let's skip to the Grom Dance. Booker enters the arena while drawing out Dragon's Bite. The Grom monster appears behind Booker and morphs into poorly made claymation monsters that, quote, wanted to look like they were made by Ray Harry Hodgson but missed the mark by a mile. But Booker made a quick work of them, so it was fine. Then the monster manifests into Ida's curse form, but it was no match for Booker, so he promptly dispatched it via a combo of magic and of course, Dragon's Bite. So it's all good. Booker, feeling super confident, is prepared for the next form, but the Grom monster morphs into the form of a 7-year-old child with a party hat. Booker is confused at first, but then his confusion turns into horror when the young boy envelopes the region in fire and reveals himself to be Booker at age 7, blaming Booker for having murdered his own family when he got his powers. Booker defends himself, but then the Grom monster summons more illusions, all while tearing into Booker for apparently committing famicide. This breaks Booker into a sobbing mess, leaving him defenseless as the Grom monster devours Booker and escapes the stadium. Ida tells Luce to help chase after it as there could be a chance that Booker is still alive in there, and then similar shit to canon happens until Luce tells Amity that she knew Amity had a crush on Booker, given the letter, and Amity reveals that she knew Luce had a crush on Booker. Oh boy. They manage to free Booker and the Grom Dance happens more or less the same as canon, just with Booker using Dragon's Bite to help them fend off the Grom monster before Luce and Amity are declared Grom Queen and Booker Grom King. The chapter ends pretty much the same as canon, nothing new to see here. Though I did however forget to mention something that I've actually didn't include in the script. Basically, we get introduced to a character called Warwick, who's a Bat Witch, and he actually falls for Amira and actually begins dancing with her, so that's pretty nice. This chapter was not great. Whilst I did like Booker's whole shtick with the Grom monster, his insecurities about the house fire and the death of his parents, Luce and Amity fighting him and it becomes a 3-way fight between Luce, Booker, Amity against the Grom monster just feels super forced. Amity having developed her crush on Booker at this point does not feel right, especially since the build-up has been more or less copied bar for bar from Luce. I'd rather have it that this remains the episode where Amity's crush on Luce is established and then have Booker as Amity's friendship grow a little more. The rest of the chapter was mostly taken from canon and thus pretty boring to read and just not nice. The chapter overall gets a 4 out of 10. Hell yeah, an original chapter, and it seems all focused on Amira Blight. The chapter starts off with the beginning of a new school semester, school year for those in the UK, and the Blight twins acting up again and are now being chased down the corridor. The laughter turns into terror when they run into a tall individual with bat ears and a skull mask. Amira prepares to attack, but lucky for the twins, the dude means no harm. He reveals himself to be Warwick and that this weird looking room is his workshop. Amira was amazed at these inventions and even teases Warwick about it, causing him to blush. He then asks what Amira is doing in this workshop, which just made her blush, whilst he questions how he knew her name. Warwick explains that it was because she was, quote, the most popular girl in school. You got power, money, beauty. Inspecting the workshop, Amira asks Warwick his name before taking a notice of a pair of gloves. This is when Warwick reveals a secret. He has something known as congenital bile disease, in which a witch's bile sac is blocked. To counteract this, he developed gloves that allow him to draw magic without having to use his bile sac. He showcases other inventions before Amira is called into the principal's office. Cut to the present day, and Amira notices Warwick skips lunch, so he bought him lunch. Ed comes and jokes about Amira having bought him lunch, but Amira tells him it's not for him, it's for Warwick. Amity jokes about Warwick being Amira's boyfriend before Amira retorts about Amity's crush on Luce. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say Luce? I meant Booker. Amity then quickly brushes it off while turning red.
Then Amira teases Ed about his feelings for Roswell. Okay, am I missing something? When was Edric crushing on Roswell? After promising not to tell their mother about this, we then cut to Warwick being stunned that his idol, inventor Holmes, had arrived at school. Warwick's project for the school fair had caught the attention of Holmes, with Warwick being excited to show more of his projects. Later on, Holmes asks Warwick to replicate those gloves, and in exchange he'll offer an apprenticeship at his company. Once Holmes leaves, Amira reveals herself to be spying on both of them, some awkward flirting later. We cut to Amira asking Booker, Luce and Edric for help with Warwick remaking his gauntlet. She also confesses that she has a crush on Warwick, much to Booker, Luce, Amity and Edric's amusement. We then have a scene of the group helping Warwick create the gauntlet. Booker, Luce and Amity gather materials, whilst Edric, Amira and Warwick get to work on making a potion to replace the amplifying stones, as the Emperor's Coven declared them to be contraband. Once the trio returned to the Owl House, Warwick got to work assembling the glove, utilising leather and welding metal before dousing the gauntlet in the potion. Cut to Monday, Edric and Amity notice Amira looking less upbeat than she usually does. When asked, she explained that she looked into Holmes and find out he is part of the construction coven, and due to him having invented so many things, that he's on track to become new coven head, replacing Mason. She adds on that in many ways, such as the way he spoke to Warwick, he reminds her of Odalia, her and her sibling's mother, how he acts like he's in control of everything, and how he uses people as means to an end. Amity asks if she thinks Warwick is being used by Holmes, but Amira is unsure. Their conversation is cut short, however, when a red object approaches the window of Warwick's workshop. The Blights approach the workshop with Amira having a feeling something bad's going to happen, and lo and behold, something did, as before she could speak any further, an explosion shatters the wall in the workshop. Teachers and students investigate, and Amira finds an injured but conscious Warwick. After analysing the damage, seeing that it was only where the door was and that everything else was unscathed, Bump concludes that this was the result of foul play. Amira tells Bump that they saw a flying red carpet outside the window prior to the explosion. Bump then orders the school be closed for the day before telling the Blights, Booker and Luce that Warwick needs to lay low before Bump contacts his parents. Luce assures Bump that they know just the place for Warwick to lay low, and that place being the Owl House. King baps Warwick, much to his annoyance, whilst Booker and Luce speculate on the potential motive onto whoever attempted to kill Warwick. As Warwick recounts the events of the previous few days, he comes to the conclusion that Holmes attempted to kill him. When questioning why, Ida recalls how Holmes is also infamous in some areas for stealing people's inventions and claiming credit, i.e. a serial plagiarist. Warwick is in disbelief, but Edith's claims are confirmed when, on live television, Holmes unveils the spell gauntlets and even says they could be helpful in warfare, much to Warwick's horror. This then leads them all to an awful conclusion. Holmes entices people to build things for him, showcases the blueprints before he kills them and takes credit for their inventions. And now the group has to devise a plan. Holmes can't use the gauntlets without the potion, and so it must return to Warwick's workshop. Once he's there, then they can trap him. Cut to Holmes arriving at Hexside at night, assuring the guards that he'll help investigate whoever murdered the student. His plans turn south once the guards assure him that the student is alive and recovering. He convinces the guards that he still needs to assist the investigation via telling them that it's best they get some rest. Once the guards leave, Holmes quickly runs into Warwick's workshop and tries to find the blueprints. He then is caught off guard when Warwick and Amira arrive to confront him. Despite Holmes' numerous attempts to manipulate Warwick, it falls flat right on his face, made worse by the fact that Holmes recognised Amira, a second name, as being, quote, one of Alador's brat, and that the entire situation was being broadcasted live, meaning Holmes' crimes were being exposed for all the Isles to see. Realising the jig is up, Holmes attempts to attack the duo, only for them to flee on his flying carpet before Holmes chases them down, tearing a part of the school off and using the debris to form a makeshift armour. Then Booker arrives to assist the duo, flying them with I should just stop questioning this stuff at this point. Holmes then tries swatting them out of the sky, only for Ida to come and blast him, remarking how this is for her essay. Shortly thereafter, Edric and Amity arrive to see if Warwick and Amira are alright. A battle ensues, and it seems Holmes managed to get the upper hand. However, to his shock and horror, Amira managed to summon a giant construct of herself, who promptly crushes Holmes' armour and knocks him unconscious, and destroys the spell gauntlet. The illusion spell did a number on Amira and nearly knocked her unconscious, but she fell into Warwick's arms and woke up. After running away to avoid the authorities when Holmes is placed into custody and taken away, Warwick reveals that the gauntlets were destroyed before he then destroys the blueprints. Warwick and Amira finally start dating, and the chapter ends with Lilith's palisman flying above the area and reporting to Lilith. I really wanted to love this chapter. When I first read it, I thought it was great, but now, knowing what I know now, this chapter is, whilst not exactly bad, isn't exactly great either. The dialogue is pretty clunky, but not too bad, and the relationship between Warwick and Amira feels really, really rushed and forced. As far as I remember, they never interacted in prior chapters, sans enchanting Grom fight, which I'm pretty sure is now Face My Fears. Sorry, the titles are just kind of forgettable. Which just makes their development super lame.
The storyline of this chapter was pretty cool, but nothing too special. I did like the fight at the end, and Amira using that giant illusion construct was really baller. Though Booker suddenly getting wings is something I found odd, and the same grammatical errors persist throughout the chapter. Overall, a pretty okay chapter that gets a 6 out of 10. This chapter is based off the episode of the same name, so let's get through this, though I will be whizzing through this as I want this video out pretty soon. The chapter starts off like canon, with Boscha acting out all confident about the upcoming Grudgeby match. We then cut to Skara preparing for the school day, some chatter and Why? What's with this story and putting suggestive and sexual references left and right? I get this is probably a Smiling Friends reference, I haven't really watched Smiling Friends, and it makes people uncomfortable, though Cowboy Alchemist has said that this was intentional, but still, calm down, will ya? After her dad prepares to hunt down Pizza, we cut to Boscha arriving at school, and same old, nothing special here. Meanwhile, Luce, Ida and Booker arrive. Booker is excited as it's their first Grudgeby season with crazy colours, fireworks and cheerleaders, referring to Some chatter later and we cut to a history class. Willow answers a question correctly and everyone applauds her for it. This moment of greatness didn't last too long as Boscha began to make fun of Willow, like in canon, but fear not. Booker is here to try and get her to piss off. Despite Booker's warnings, Boscha continues to poke fun at Willow and Booker. This causes Booker to snap and use a magic construct to restrain Boscha against the wall before removing the pin that she stole off Willow. Man, that must have surely shaken Boscha to the core. Surely she must at least learn not to fuck with Booker, especially given the past few times he lost his shit both in the page and in universe, right?
No.
Same shit as canon happened, though we do get Amity questioning Skara on if Boscha is a true friend or not, and we have Boscha taking the piss out of the group like canon, except Booker is involved. Booker then threatens Boscha, but Boscha blackmails him with the fact that she could just as easily hand him into the authorities, explaining why he doesn't retaliate against Boscha as hard as he did previously, and why Boscha still fucks with him. Okay, yeah, that is a good explanation. After Luce challenges Boscha to a Grudgeby game, the stuff as canon happens more or less the same. It's just that Booker questions Luce's decision alongside her and Amity blushing at Booker standing up to Boscha. Then Boscha triggers Booker's PTSD by summoning a fireball, causing him to flee from the scene before Luce and Amity comfort him upon finding him. Some more canon stuff happens, just with Booker getting annoyed at Luce and it's a Grudgeby game, and like in canon, the team gets their asses handed to. Luce treating this like it's an Azura story causes Booker to flip his shit and go on a tirade about how much Luce is a fucking moron, deeply unserious, and it's been ever since she started talking to him. Is this really what you want to be starting to date, Luce? Booker then immediately realizes his mistake, but it was too late as Luce runs off crying.
Later, Amity finds Booker and hands him some water. She then confronts him and explains that, while she understands his frustrations with Luce, those do not excuse his outburst and he must apologise to Luce and hold himself accountable for what he did. Instead, Amity's like, yeah, same lol. And then we have Amity just recalling when she was captain of the Banshees, except instead of Luce, it's Booker, and yes, they almost kissed. After Booker notices the Banshees arriving and tells Amity, quote, he'll finish this, we cut to the school greenhouse where Gus, Willow and Luce are worried that Booker will be turned in given that it appears to be a guaranteed loss. Amity not only disagrees but reveals to Luce that Booker has a crush on her, with Gus dropping the big reveal that he's crushing on them both. Ida demands to know why Lilith still sides with Belos despite all that he has done and asks if he also has blood on her hands. Lilith admits it, but then Sarah and York Gearmind arrive, with Sarah adding that Lilith spared York's life. Cut to a flashback to where Lilith was present when the Bridges family house burned down. Despite the wreckage and dead bodies, Lilith had to keep her cool, then Sarah comes out of the wreckage, holding her husband's body. After the two former childhood friends glare at each other, Lilith tells Sarah, quote, go, bury your husband and never let me see you again. She then explains she's never arrested her out of guilt for what she has done. Ida still explains that she's choosing to side with Belos, but Lilith justifies it by stating Belos can and will cure her once she joins the Emperor's Coven. Despite this, Ida still declines, stating that even if she wasn't cured, she would not join Belos, especially after what she did to the Bridges family. Lilith is in disbelief, questioning why Ida would still protect Booker with her life. After reaffirming her decision, Ida gives Lilith her ring and tells her to lie to Belos and say that a fight broke out. Despite saying that she can't accept her answer, Lilith takes off before Ida welcomes both Sarah and York into the Owl House. Back at Hexside, the Grudgeby match goes on the same as canon. You know the story. The group wins the match, except that Amity doesn't suffer her injury. Boscha gets salty, even more so that her team ditches her, and so threatens Skara and Booker to turn them into the authorities. She then retracts those threats once Willow explains that she'll have to admit to the authorities that she lost the Grudgeby game, and that admitting defeat is one of the few things Boscha did not like. After Skara, now happy that she's free of Boscha's influence, goes on a date with Bo, the chapter ends with Booker officially being adopted by Ida.
This chapter was not exactly great by any means, it's not bad or terrible. I liked when Willow used Bosch's own ego against her, and I liked the subplot about Scar slowly distancing himself away from Bosch, and that bit about Lilith's history with the bridges was pretty neat. But alas, this chapter is held back by clunky dialogue. This feeling sad could have been written a little better, and the scene with Amity and Booker, which I've already described before, and also the scene is just... ugh, no. Overall, this chapter gets a 5 out of 10. Penultimate chapter, folks. Let's rock on with this. The chapter starts off the same as canon, just with Booker / the Seventh Son being put on Belos' hit list. Same song as Dance's canon, just minor changes, so let's skip to the part where the group arrives at the Emperor's castle. Booker devises a plan in which goes after the healing hat and sneaks in using an invisibility cloak developed by Warwick, whilst Luce and Amity act like Booker is still with the main group. Booker then uses the invisibility cloak to follow Lilith towards the Emperor's room, where he witnesses Belos consume a palisman, grossing him out. Oh dear, that's terrible! Why would he do this? Some dilly-dallying later, you know the story, it's just that Amity's included, and Booker leads a charge, and now Hex Squad is in the run. Like in canon, the group decides to mess around for a bit, and Booker gains healing magic as a result of touching the hat. Their messing around was short-lived as the room sealed itself shut. Booker tried ramming into the door to break it open, but failed in the process. Same as canon, it's just that Lilith holds Booker hostage instead of Luce, and sends out her palisman to ask Ida to fight her. Ida arrives, she fights Lilith, also using an avatar quote, revealing to her that Booker is officially now her son, and Booker uses his magic to break out of his fear and charge at Lilith. Then Lilith drops the bombshell that she cursed Ida, and this causes Ida to lunge at Lilith in fury. But the curse was taking too much of a toll on Ida like in canon. Despite Booker's pleas, Ida goes with her thanks for being in my life speech just for some added bits before Booker is taken away by Owlbert. Oh, and Belos now has Dragon's Bite and asks Lilith to destroy it, alongside revealing that he has no plans to cure Ida and instead petrify her. Booker then returns back home to see everyone napping. King surprises Booker, which wakes people up. They notice Ida's absence before Booker then breaks down sobbing, and that concludes chapter 16. There isn't really much to say about this chapter. Whilst I did like Amity's inclusion here, Booker using the invisibility cloak was quite clever and the pacing was alright, and I didn't entirely dislike the ending. It still suffers from pretty clunky dialogue and it's straying not too far off from what actually happens in canon. Like, I'd love to see Booker actually fight Lilith a little bit or something. Shit, I'd love for Booker to have been held hostage in this episode, something like what Zhao did in Taang in Season 1 Episode 13 of Avatar The Last Airbender, and then he fights his way out. Seeing the rest of the group organise the rescue mission. I threw this idea in like 5 seconds, so it wasn't fully fleshed out, but man, just imagine that. Anyway, the chapter isn't terrible, but not exactly great either. It's a 5 out of 10 from me. Here we are, folks, the season finale's upon us. The chapter begins with Booker's grandmother, Alice, looking outside. She, alongside the rest of the remaining Bridges, now Gearmind, family, located to a new hideout after the previous one was destroyed. Nobody knew the location of this hideout, except they were expecting someone, though that's probably just a typo. That person being Yoa Slayer, a double amputee on her arms that uses her palisman to perform tasks. Alice notes that Yoa never comes over unless it's for something which Yoa elaborates as someone, and that someone being Booker Bridges. Booker was accompanied by the Hex Squad. York asked why they didn't try to stop Belos. Roswell and Jason replied with them wanting to take the healing cat so that Ida could be cured. This just served to annoy York further, stating that now they've just painted what amounts to a big fat target on their backs, now trying to evade the Emperor's Coven is going to be much harder. After the Hex Squad is introduced to Yoa, revealing that she was the head of the Oracle Coven, we cut to Yoa examining Booker. When asked by Booker as to why she's come to see him, Yoa explains that it's to fulfill his destiny of being the seventh son. She explains that the seventh spawn of the seventh spawn are individuals blessed with magic from the Titan with one goal, and that is to protect the Isles from harm. This magic has been passed down via generation after generation. It is also revealed that the incarnation prior to Booker was last alive 400 years ago. Like, what? I'm sorry, but this makes no sense, though it is entirely likely Belos erased any and all records of a seventh son between the 1620s and 2020s. Yoa then goes on to say that the seventh son only appears in times of crisis. So we're going by Power Rangers logic now? Plus, that would also mean that the person would have to have at least 7 kids, though I do not know how BI traditions work. Seriously, this is just damn confusion. Anyway, Booker then asks what the crisis could be. Yoa then explains wild magic and how Belos took it all away from them from establishing the Coven system. You all know the story. That is when Booker figures out that Belos is the crisis. Yes, no less than 24 hours after fighting him, only now does Booker figure out that Belos is the real crisis. Some more chapter later and they turn on the news to see Ida's about to be petrified, with Amity noting it's a fate worse than death. Booker then prepares to rescue her, but York persuades him from not doing so as it'll be too dangerous. Booker retorts that Ida saved him yesterday and that he should do the same. York, however, explains that Booker is a high priority target. Belos would take him out in a heartbeat as a result.
Some more back and forth with the Hex Squad siding with Booker, even adding that Belos is not as powerful as Booker, albeit not right now as he isn't fully trained. But York still does not budge and determines that his best at Booker remains hidden. King, however, rips into York, stating that despite his talk about a revolution in getting back at Belos, he chooses to hide like a coward, i.e. all bark and no bite. He then goes on to say that, despite York being the Crow Wizard and having inspired people to stand up against the Emperor, he doesn't strike Belos directly when the opportunity presents itself, and he just sits on his ass all day and acts like a coward and not protect his family, that he doesn't deserve to wear that mask. Honestly, King, that just perfectly describes Twitter. This changes York's mind and now they devise a plan. Booker is arrested and taken to the Conformatorium to rescue Ida, whilst the remaining Bridges sans Skara sneak in and break out all the prisoners. Meanwhile, Luce will be in the crowd of spectators watching to avoid being put in harm's way. So, Skara is just gonna do absolutely fuck all here? Come on.
And how does Booker get arrested? By simply turning himself in, with the guard feeling hella lucky because Booker's bounty would have paid for his daughter's medical bills. Okay, I found that part pretty nice and a little funny. Booker and King arrive in the prison and fight their way towards a conformatorium. The rest of the Bridges, sans Skara, are prepared to break people out of their cells while Luce and Amity watch the petrification, worried for Ida. Meanwhile, Lilith gets alerted that Booker and the rest of the Bridges are here. Despite Kikimora insisting that guards be sent to deal with him, Lilith declines and states that she must deal with him herself. Booker and King find Ida. Ida explains that it's too dangerous, you know the episode, and Lilith walks in. An enraged Booker fights Lilith, tells him to hear her out. Booker's like, I don't give a fuck what you say, but King persuades him. Lilith explains the whole ordeal about the curse, Emperor's cover, and yada yada yada, you all know that kind of stuff. Giving Booker's dragon's bite, she, Booker and King went ahead to now rescue Ida. Then Lilith and King get whisked away like in canon, leaving Booker to fight Belos. At first, Booker got the upper hand, but then Belos summoned a worm-like creature that seemingly ate Booker. Belos' victory was short-lived, however, as Booker basically went what amounts to Super Saiyan like in Chapter 5 and seemingly defeats Belos, damaging his mask. But unfortunately, Belos manages to reform himself before explaining why he's doing what he's doing. Belos claims that Booker could save the Boiling Isles, as Booker's blood is a hybrid mixture of human and Titan's blood, and that Booker's blood could allegedly save the Isles. Belos does, however, tell Booker that he's not needed now, but what he does need is the portal that was constructed by the Bridges, that being the door to which Booker declined. Luce meanwhile uses Albert to try and save Ida, but is whacked by Hunter. After some persuasion via the beginning of the petrification ceremony, Booker accepts Belos' offer, but if you watch the episode, you know that the portal is destroyed, and so Booker does just that via slicing it with Dragon's Bite. Booker rescues Ida, King, Lilith, and Luce while tossing out his sweater? Don't you mean sweater or hoodie? Via threatening Kikimora to open the cage. Everyone flees, Belos spouts some propaganda about the 7th son attacking him, and that how it proves him right about wild magic. Hunter says some stuff, Lilith shares the curse between her and Ida, a spell like in canon. Luce kisses Booker on the cheek before Booker notes something isn't right about Belos, but he does have a weakness though. As for Belos, he's rebuilding the portal and is happier now that Booker's trapped within the demon realm, and that concludes the season finale. This chapter was not horrible. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. Whilst I did enjoy the fight between Booker and Belos and Booker and Lilith, and I did find other parts of the chapter nice, it's still held back by meh dialogue, Luce doing next to fuck all, Skara doing absolutely fuck all, pacing being a bit hard to follow, and what Yo and Belos said basically being really confusing. The cycle of the 7 makes little sense, and I think something would make more sense if it was like, say, the Silver-Eyed Warriors from Ruby, or the Avatar cycle from Avatar, instead of just being like, you know, they only awaken when something bad happens, type deal. If the 400 years deal was to really be kept in, I'd prefer that it be the result of Belos deliberately erasing records until only a few remained, with the only people who know being Coven Heads and Belos himself. Overall, this chapter is not that bad, and it does end Season 1 on a high note of 7 out of 10. In conclusion, I have mixed thoughts about the 7th Son. First of all, characters. Sorry Cowboy Alchemist, but I just did not like Booker Bridges for a majority of the season. He's hot-headed, swears like a sailor, and he's just super aggro, making him really unlikable. However, he does get better towards the end of Season 1, so I think he's fine enough, so we'll see how he goes in Season 2. And the height jokes get really old really fast. The rest of the Bridges family, however, they've been written decently enough. My favourite being Roswell. He's charming, he has nice chemistry with the rest of the cast, and I wish he appears more next season. Whilst we don't see much of Warwick outside of the 3 chapters we see him, he does have good potential, and in the chapters that he does appear in, he is pretty nice, so I hope that we see him a lot more next season.
Warwick himself actually being an XP of Cowboy Alchemist's Gravity Falls OC Patrick from his Gravity Falls fanfiction Weirder Things, which I may cover at a later date.
The canon characters themselves behave
More or less like they do in canon, just with some mischaracterization here and there, such as with Amity or Luz. The dialogue is clunky but not unbearably bad. The pacing could use some work, especially if the relationship development in it is just plain atrocious. And narrative wise, there are plot holes everywhere and things do not make much sense. Plus, a lot of what made the earlier chapters boring is that too much got revealed way too soon, ruining any suspense or intrigue the fanfiction may have had. Not to mention, a majority of it was just taken from canon, which makes it pretty boring if you are. However, this by no means makes the fanfiction bad or terrible, as it has plenty of its potential and there were a lot of parts that I actually found quite enjoyable. And as to if I recommend it, well, if you like OCX canon, you're going to like this fic a lot, maybe even love it. If you're a casual fanfic goer, then you may have more mixed thoughts on this fanfiction. You could love it, you could hate it. Who knows? And if you don't like OCX canon, then well, you're going to have a bad time. With that being said, this season earns a final score of 5 out of 10. Not bad, but not great. But this isn't the last of Cowboy Alchemist we'll be seeing on this channel, as he has other fanfictions I like to go over at a later date. A huge special thanks to my co-file supporters, Champion El Cid and Mariotron. Your support will forever be appreciated. Click that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all later.